Ripa had always been the ultimate conversationalist. For more than 3 decades, her voice had been a constant on American television, bright, rapid-fire, funny, and relentless. From her early days as an actress on All My Children to her long run as co-host of Live with Kelly and Mark, talking was not just her job. It was her oxygen. So when her dentist told her she would not be allowed to speak for 10 full days after gum graft surgery, the idea landed like a punch. "I'm an overbrusher," she later admitted on her podcast, Let's Talk Off Camera. "I brush my teeth too much. It's a good bad habit, but I've caused gum recession down here specifically, and so they've got to regum my gums." The procedure, common yet notoriously uncomfortable, involves harvesting soft tissue, usually from the roof of the mouth, and grafting it onto areas where the gums have receded. In Kelly's case, years of aggressive brushing had thinned the tissue protecting her teeth. 5 years earlier, her dentist had flagged the problem and given her a timeline. She could wait, but not forever. At the time, she had laughed it off. "I didn't think I'd still be on the air in 5 years, she joked. The years passed. The recession worsened. Eventually, the doctor's tone changed. "Now you don't have the luxury of time." In late July 2026, she finally went under. The decision and the fear. Kelly had always prided herself on a high pain threshold. She was the kind of patient who often skipped Novocaine at the dentist, waving off the needle with a cheerful "I'm fine." Mark Consuelos, her husband of nearly 30 years and co-host, knew this better than anyone. "She famously doesn't feel pain," he told viewers. That reputation made the coming discomfort more alarming. If something hurt Kelly Ripa, it had to be serious. In the days leading up to the surgery, she managed her stress the only way she knew how, by talking about it. On the podcast episode recorded before the procedure, she walked guest Michelle Buteau through the details with characteristic candor. They would take skin from the roof of her mouth and place it over the recessed gums. She would be forbidden from talking for 10 days. Soft foods only. No straws. No examining the surgical site by pulling down her lip. No flossing. The list felt endless. "We're already managing my stress level for not being able to talk for 10 days, she said. Then, with a flash of dark humor, death creeps in through the gums. And later, "Do I ever need to be hurt again? I don't think so." The jokes masked real anxiety. For a woman whose entire professional identity rested on being present, verbal, and instantaneous, enforced silence was a kind of exile. The surgery and the immediate aftermath. The procedure itself was straightforward by oral surgery standards, yet the recovery was anything but. Tissue was carefully harvested from the palate and sutured into place along the areas of recession. The donor site on the roof of the mouth is particularly sensitive. Every swallow, every accidental tongue movement, every attempt to speak sends sharp reminders that the body is healing. Mark Consuelos broke the news to Live viewers on Monday, July 27, 2026. Kevin Jonas sat in as guest co-host. "Kelly sends her love," Mark said. "It's a gum graft surgery. She's doing well. She's doing great. But she's not allowed to talk." Jonas immediately landed the obvious joke. "That's got to be the hardest thing that she's ever done." The studio laughed. Mark laughed too, but the concern was visible. He described the post-op rules in detail: soft food, no straws, no examining the site. The night before, Kelly had tilted her head and silently begged him to look. He refused to pull her lip down, instead peering carefully and declaring, "It looks great." The pain surprised even her. "When she goes into the dentist, she doesn't really use the Novocaine," Mark explained, "but this one hurts. So I know it's bad." For the first 48 hours, the discomfort was sharp and constant. The roof of the mouth felt raw. The grafted areas were tight and tender. Speaking, even whispering, was forbidden. The couple communicated largely by text and by phone notes. Mark became the enforcer of doctor's orders, gently but firmly reminding her to stay compliant. Days of silence. The second day came, and Kelly was still absent. Guest hosts rotated through the live set. Mila Kunis, Pamela Adlon, Scott Foley, and later Sarah Chulka, Jenna Dewan, Carrie Coon, Michelle Buteau, and the show's own DJ Deja Vu. The program continued, bright and energetic, but the empty chair at the desk was noticeable. Viewers sent well wishes. Social media filled with messages of support and the inevitable jokes about Kelly being forced into silence. At home, the silence was heavier. Kelly, normally a non-stop talker, even off-camera, found herself reduced to gestures, written notes, and the occasional carefully mouthed word when the pain allowed. Eating became an exercise in patience. Soft foods, yogurt, mashed potatoes, blended soups were the only options. Anything that required chewing or suction was off-limits. The simple act of swallowing reminded her of the surgical sites. She later described the experience with the same frankness she brought to everything else. The restriction on talking was the hardest part. For someone whose career and personality were built on conversation, the quiet felt unnatural, almost punitive. Yet she also recognized the necessity. The grafts needed time to integrate. Any strain, talking, probing, aggressive rinsing, risked compromising the results. Mark continued updating the audience. On the second day, he reported she was feeling better and saying certain things, though still under strict orders. He kept the tone light, but the underlying seriousness was clear. This was not a minor dental visit. It was real surgery with real recovery demands. The psychology of recovery. Silence changes a person, even temporarily. For Kelly, the forced quiet created an unexpected mental space. Without the constant flow of banter, interviews, and audience interaction, the days stretched differently. She rested. She watched the show from home. She communicated with her family through texts and the occasional carefully limited conversation. The overbrushing that had caused the problem became a quiet point of reflection. A good-bad habit, she had called it. The very diligence that had kept her smile bright for decades had contributed to the recession. In the quiet of recovery, she considered the irony. The same perfectionism that drove her career had also driven her dental routine past the point of health. She was not alone in the experience. Gum recession is common, especially among people who brush aggressively or grind their teeth. Kelly had dealt with teeth grinding for years and had even used masseter Botox and retainers to manage it. The gum graft was simply the latest chapter in a long relationship with dental maintenance. She had spent decades correcting issues that might have been addressed earlier in life. This procedure was another necessary step. Returning to sound. 10 days is a long time when you are not allowed to use your primary tool. By the time the restriction lifted, Kelly's voice felt almost foreign, rusty from disuse, cautious about volume and intensity. The surgical sites were still healing. Full recovery would take longer. But the worst of the pain had subsided, and the grafts were holding. When she finally returned to the live set, the reunion was emotional for the audience and for the hosts. The empty chair was filled again. The rapid-fire banter resumed. Viewers who had followed the story through Mark's updates and the rotating guest hosts celebrated the return of the familiar energy. On her podcast, she revisited the experience with the same humor and honesty that had defined the lead-up. She described the procedure in graphic but matter-of-fact terms. She owned the delay of 5 years. She acknowledged the pain. And she laughed at the absurdity of a professional talker being ordered into silence.